Hey guys, welcome back to Home Built, and this week we are going to be tackling Harry's throttle issues. Alright guys, welcome back to Home Built, and those watching previously will have seen that I took Harry to Adelaide. It's a 1,300 kilometre trip each way to the Adelaide Rally, and it was an amazing event. I had such a great time until Harry started playing up. Now, if you missed it, I'll put a link up above so you can catch up, and please think about subscribing. It does help the channel out. A few things to cover on the way. Many of you saw that I went over and there was flood waters that I had to get through to get to Harry. Basically, the centre of New South Wales is completely flooded at the moment. It's just a very big flat area, so it's taking sort of weeks and months to drain all the water away. So paddocks are just like lakes. There were some concerns about me driving through floodwaters. I like to reiterate, do not drive through unknown floodwaters. It's extremely dangerous. You can get swept away. The stuff that I was going through were actually open roads that were traffic controlled, and they were quite shallow areas of dead still water. I could see the road. If you see the videos, you can actually see the dotted line of the road through the water. It wasn't that deep. It's just still daunting when you're going in something so low like this. If I was in an SUV, I wouldn't have even thought twice. People were also asking about the exhaust that I built for Harry and how it went. It was much better, but it's ugly. So I plan on doing something else. I needed to do something before I went, just so that it didn't basically pierce my skull and really drive me batty on the way over and the way back. It performed perfectly. It has changed the tune slightly, so it was backfiring quite a bit, which is something I'm going to hopefully have a look at today. And as I said, I will be doing something different again. There will be another iteration. I like the amount of baffling. It still sounds great. It's just not the loudest thing ever. But it didn't solve all of the noise issues. The biggest issue really is something that most people crave and chase, is actually the sound of the individual throttle bodies. The actual induction noise is sort of this deep that really, just even at a cruise on the highway, that is a lot of the noise there. It's just that really low, bassy, deep sucking noise from every single individual cylinder, and that is something that's much harder to work with. There was a suggestion in the past which I actually chased down. Currently I have K&N air filters, and they're basically just sort of the round old sort of V8 carby type air filters that are squished into an oval. I got the closest ones I could find that would match were paper filters, and the issue is that they're the same diameter, but they're about 5 millimeters shorter, so I have to actually get some spacers cut up so that they fit in, because at the moment they don't seal, so they wouldn't actually filter anything. But they make muffle the sound a little bit more, having the paper filters in there. We'll just see. The K&N filters were fantastic on the dyno. We tried them with and without the filters, and it made 0 horsepower difference. So they breathe very well, but yeah, they don't hide the noise that much. So, getting back to the rally, I had an issue on the second day. The first day was fantastic, had a great time, and then midway through the second day of the rally of 3 days, the throttle started dropping out. So at first it was just at the very start of the throttle pedal. So just as you just lightly starting to touch the throttle, there would be nothing, and then it would take up. Further on in the day, during the stages, what was actually happening is the throttle completely dropped out. So I was mid-stage and put my foot down, and the throttle signal is messed up somewhere, and the ECU says nah, and drops it back to idle. So I'm sort of rolling, and I have to cycle the key off and on again to get throttle back. I'd had to do that a couple of times. I had to pull out because obviously there's cars coming up behind me, and it's dangerous, and it was not good. What I discovered was I actually ended up driving all the way back from Adelaide and had zero issues. I think it only seems to raise its head after a bunch of full throttle driving. So obviously during the stages, you're going flat out. Driving home on regular drives, you basically never hit flat throttle unless you're trying to give it a bit, and it performed flawlessly for that. So I've looked at the logs. I've talked to Adam at Link in New Zealand, and he's had a look as well. But I've narrowed it down to being either the throttle position sensor or the throttle motor in the back of the car. The pedal sensor is good. It's the throttle position sensor in the motor. So let's go and have a look at that now. So you can see the setup that I made for this car. Basically, this is an electronic throttle motor from a BMW M5 V10 that I have set up to run my individual throttle bodies, and I've just connected up to the linkage that would normally be connected up to a throttle cable. This has all worked flawlessly for about 10,000 kilometers now, and it was just starting to raise its head. So there's wiring going to the motor and there's wiring going to the throttle position sensor, which you can see it's exposed down here. I've actually pulled it apart to double check that the wiring was all done correctly, and it was all good. The throttle position sensor sits on the end of the individual throttle bodies, right back in the corner here. And that is a BMW E36 throttle position sensor. So the issue with that sensor is that it only has a single signal. So most throttle position sensors need to run with redundant signals, so two signals, and I think on the E36 that relies on two different sensors. I'm assuming that's the case. The pedal I have actually has two signals in the one sensor on the pedal, and they run at opposite polarity so that they sort of run past each other, and there's just sort of redundancy there. So if some of the wiring is out or something goes wrong, it will show up in the logs. The issue is because I only have the single signal, I can't see if one of them has fallen out. So I did actually lose a throttle pedal previously from one of the signals dropping out. And I could see in the log, one of the two signals was dropping out, and that was my issue. I could narrow it down. I knew it was the sensor, and that was easy. In this case, because I only have the one, that's a problem. That's why I talked to Raceworks, and I've actually got one of these. Now this is their TPS 502, and this sensor I hope will actually fit into the same spot, but this actually runs two signals. So this is going to require a little bit more wiring than what's there. I just need to run another sensor wire through my loom to come all the way up and connect up to this. So let's start pulling out the old sensor and see if we can get this one to fill its spot. All right, so I've gone through now and I've ran the wires back up under the car from the ECU to run the second wire through and put it through one of my spare terminals on my bulkhead connectors, which are back in the corner in here. You probably can't see in the dark, but over here somewhere. And what I found is that the new sensor fits, the bolt spacing is correct and the size of the shaft is all correct, but the depth of the shaft is different. So this one sits on further, so I needed some spacers. I have access to a friend's CNC plasma table, so I just quickly drew one of these up in CAD. I made two of them. I've just got to clean up the slag off the back. CNC plasma tables are absolutely amazing. It saved me so much time. I could make this by hand, but like to draw it up and cut it out, in 10 minutes on a CNC plasma table is amazing. So let's clean these up and then see if we can go about fitting this and seeing if I need one or two spacers. I thought I'd make two just in case. All right, I've gone through now, I've rewired it all up, I've installed the sensor, I've put the filter back on, so now I need to get into the software and recalibrate for that new sensor. And then, fingers crossed, the car will start again. So, I spent a bit of time then trying to calibrate the TPS sensor, and there's obviously something I'm not doing right in the software. And it's given me an error, so I've sent a message off to Link in New Zealand and hopefully they'll get back to me on that quite soon. So while I'm waiting, I'm going to install some new wideband sensors into my exhaust. Now, I believe because I've been running rich, I've killed the previous wideband sensors, and that's something I'd like to put out to you guys. Why am I going through wideband sensors so much? Do these things just not live very long compared to, say, the narrowband sensors that are in modern cars? Or is it because the car's just running too rich or something like that? I mean, I believe that can potentially do the same thing. Raceworks have sent me out some new ones, which is fantastic. So I'm going to put these in, and this time hopefully we can get them to last a bit longer. And this will start telling me how my tune is, and I should be able to go through with you guys and start cleaning up that tune a little bit more, and maybe lean it out a little bit more so that it's not killing sensors. All right, well, I know this is not reading spark plugs, but I've pulled out the two old O2 sensors, and this one is really black all the way around. It's just really thick black, whereas this one is quite odd, that it almost looks like it's sort of, I don't know if that means it's running lean on this side, but like, you know, it's, I'm not sure which direction around it was facing, but yeah, if it will actually focus on it. It's thick and dark around the base, all the way around it's thick and dark, except for on one side where it's quite clean. So that gives me pause. I need to go through now and check that my settings on either bank are correct. Maybe the banks are, the linkage has moved slightly and the adjustment is out, so they're not running evenly, which could heavily affect things. So let me know in the comments if that means something, if it means nothing. Would like to know. Neither of these are working anymore. They're giving me 0 readings. So I've swapped them out for new units, and it's actually rattling. They're both rattling, so I assume something inside has died. So yeah, so let me know in the comments if any of you have any experience and actually know what any of this means. All right, so I have an update. Now the car runs and drives, and I've taken it for a test drive, and that all seems to work. When I was out on the road, I did a quick log, and with the new O2 sensors in, I noticed quite a disturbing graph that the car is running, at least one bank is running extremely lean off of throttle. So what I'm thinking is that the banks have come out of sync. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to pull the filters off, and I'm going to go through and see if I can match the banks and see whether they're pulling different vacuums. I'll go through now and let's check them out. Well, I did notice that the banks were out quite a bit, so I did some adjustment on the trim on either bank. The individual throttles seem to be reasonably even per bank. It was just the linkage on the throttle. So I'm going to raise the idle now to about 2,000 RPM so that it goes from idle up, and then we'll see if they're also even, and then fingers crossed they're good. At full throttle, it makes less of an issue because the blades are completely open. It's more when there's just that tiny little amount of blade open at very low throttle inputs where you get the big discrepancies. When everything's open, there's all the air coming in, and yeah, there's not as much discrepancy. The tool I'm using for that is this thing. Creates a vacuum, and it sort of sucks this little ball up to a certain height, depending on how much vacuum there is, and you want to make sure that they all have the same level of vacuum on each one, and then you know that they're even. All right, that is looking much better. They're looking quite even still at the higher idle, which was I just set in the ECU setting, so that makes it nice and easy. So I'm going to put the filters back on, go for a test drive, and just see how those lambda readings are and see what sort of log we get. All right, well, that is a result. So I went out again, I did another test run, basically got the car nice and warm. Sitting here and doing everything while it was idling was a really good way to get the car nice and warm to start with. And then going out, and I was doing a bunch of full throttle runs and basically trying to replicate what I was doing at the rally. And by the end, the throttle dropped out again. So we've got a new throttle position sensor, which means it's not that. So it did the exact same thing that it was doing in the rally. It dropped out basically completely. I had to cycle the key off and on again, and then it went. So I am thinking now by process of deduction that it is the electronic throttle motor. Now, a lot of you guys are probably wondering why I even bothered running an e-throttle, but the e-throttle has a lot of benefits. The cold starts are nice and smooth. This thing cold starts all the way down to below 0 Celsius and up to sort of 40-degree days. No dramas. It'll warm start, cold start, all that sort of stuff is all programmed in easily. And it also does, all of the idle controls and all that sort of stuff is all done by that. And also the cruise control and everything else. So there are lots of benefits to having an electronic throttle. Separate from the pedal, but in this case it's proved itself a bit of a liability, so I will venture to sort it out. I'm just sending the logs off to Adam at Link again. I've been bombarding him with logs, but hopefully he can have a look and sort of see if he can corroborate with me, just to have a second opinion that I'm pretty sure that that's the final common denominator. Well, it has been 24 hours or so since I sent all those things off to Adam in New Zealand, and yeah, he had a look at the stuff and it doesn't actually appear to be anything electrically wrong with it. It is the mechanical side, and now he's looked into it more. It makes more and more sense. Basically, what my brother found when we were at the rally, when we were searching through things, is that this linkage between the throttle motor and the actual actuator for the individual throttle bodies, it had the little lock nuts on either end had come loose. I locked it off again, just taking any slop out of the linkage, but I didn't actually give it any preload, if you like, because the motor is spring-based. And it's got a spring pulling it back to 0. What I should have done is, instead of locking it off when it's at 0, I should have locked it off just up above that slightly and then tell it that that's 0. Because what's happening is when it's getting hot, it's trying to send the motor back to 0 throttle when I'm backing off the throttle. But what it's actually getting is it's getting 0.2% throttle, and it's not closed, and it's sending all the power to the motor to try and close the throttle, and it's not happening. And the ECU looks at it and goes, if it's sending full power to the throttle for more than 2 seconds, obviously the throttle's not responding, so it cuts the throttle as a safety feature, and that's what's happening. So what I think might be happening in my case is, even though it's reading 0 throttle and it's fine when I'm not really getting on it, I think when it gets hot, maybe there's enough heat and movement in the linkage somewhere that just gives it that 0.2% of throttle. So a very tiny little bit. It's moved it enough that the motor's going, no, the throttle's not closed, and it's trying to close the throttle, and it's just killing the fun. So in the end, it was an adjustment issue. Now, I still have to check it and confirm, but I can adjust that now. And like I said, there were things I needed to do anyway. It's better that I change that sensor over to a sensor that gives 2 signals. It was the reason I didn't do it in the first place is it was difficult to get a second throttle position sensor. There is one here on the throttle motor itself, but the trouble is that even 0 and full throttle could probably be easy to do, but the ramp rate between them might not actually have been the same. So getting these two to talk to each other nicely wouldn't have worked very well. So it would have been almost impossible to set it up with 2 separate throttle position sensors, but putting the double one in is the way to go. And now it seems that I should be able to just adjust the throttle linkage and we'll be all good. So I hope you enjoyed that troubleshooting head scratching process, and yeah, do all the things, and I'll see you on the next one. See you guys.